Hi, today I'm going to be reading chapter 4 and 5 of Mrs. Cooney is Looney. I hope you enjoy this, and let's start. Chapter 4, The Last Straw. Miss Daisy told us to be on our best behavior while she called Mrs. Cooney on the intercom. So, as soon as she turned her back on the class, me and Michael got up and shook our butts. Finally, after about 1,100,000 minutes of waiting, Mrs. Cooney walked in the door. Va 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 voom, I whispered to Michael, who sits next to me. I really don't know what va 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 voom means, but that's what my dad says when he sees a picture of that movie star who looks like Mrs. Cooney. I'm in love, Michael said. Me too, said Ryan, who was sitting behind me. Me three, I said. It was bad enough that Mrs. Cooney had a husband. Now Michael and Ryan were in love with her too. How could I ever get Mrs. Cooney to marry me instead of all those other guys? My friend Billy around the corner knows a lot about girls. He says the way to get a girl to like you is to make her laugh. So I decided I would try that. What are you teaching us today, Mrs. Cooney? Said Miss Daisy. Today we're going to learn about nutrition, said Mrs. Cooney. Does anyone know what the food pyramid is? Sure, I said. That's what they eat in Egypt. Some of the kids laughed, but Mrs. Cooney didn't. I would have to try harder. Please raise your hand instead of shouting out, said Mrs. Cooney. Andrea, the food pyramid shows us groups of food that make up a good diet, Andrea said. Good work. Good, Andrea, said Mrs. Cooney as she held up a big poster of a pyramid with food all over it. She gave Andrea a smiley face sticker for her notebook. Andrea has so many smiley face stickers on her notebook that you can hardly see the notebook anymore. Can anyone name all the food groups? Asked Mrs. Cooney. This time I raised my hand, and Mrs. Cooney called on me. The refrigerator, the freezer, the pantry, and the kitchen cabinets. That's where we group the food in my house. A few kids laughed. Mrs. Cooney crossed her arms in front of her and tapped her foot until the laughing died down. She had on her serious face. She's cute when she's serious. Not exactly, she said. Andrea had her hand in the air, as usual, and she got called on. Andrea named all the dumb food groups and got another smiley face sticker. Why doesn't a food pyramid fall on Andrea's head? I wish I could punch her. Good, said Mrs. Cooney. Kids, where you eat may be as important as what you eat. Tell me, where do you usually eat your meals? In my mouth, I said. Where else would I eat my meals? No, I mean, do you eat in your kitchen? Do you eat in the car? Do you usually eat in front of the TV? We all eat our rooms in front of the TV, I said. Why, AJ? Asked Mrs. Cooney. Because there's no room behind the TV. We'd be squished. So this might be a little confusing. What do you think it means? Not this part. Think about it. So when she says eat in front of the TV, what do you think she means? It means watching TV while you eat. That's what it means. But AJ is, to make Mrs. Cooney laugh, is saying, yes, I eat in front of the TV, but he means in a different sense. AJ means this. What do you think AJ means? He is talking literally. He literally means literally eat in front of the TV. It doesn't mean he's watching TV while doing it. It could be as he's watching. So this is literally, and this is figuratively. This is figuratively and that's literally. Okay? So he thought this would be funny. Thought this could be funny, but it isn't. Or at least to Mrs. Cooney. All the kids laughed. Mrs. Cooney put her hand on her hips and wrinkled her forehead at me. But she wasn't laughing. Maybe she was in a bad mood. Breakfast is the most important meal of the day, Mrs. Cooney said. You can't do good work at school if you haven't eaten a good breakfast. That goes for grown-ups too. For example, it's hard for me to work on an empty stomach. Okay. You shouldn't work on an empty stomach, Mrs. Cooney. I said, you should work on your desk. Everybody laughed at that one. Mrs. Cooney slapped her own forehead like there was a bug on it. AJ, said Mrs. Cooney, can you please try not to shout things out? Now, how many of you eat breakfast in your PJs? That's disgusting, I said. My mom puts my breakfast on a plate. AJ, go sit in the hall, Mrs. Cooney said. That's the last straw. So, what did straws have to do with anything? She wasn't even talking about straws. Do you know what this means? The last straw. Think about it. What do you think it means? Think about a few guesses. Okay, so the last straw doesn't actually mean the last straw. That means it's not literal. It's figurative. Do you know what this expression means? This expression means that's your last chance. That was your last chance. That means, yeah, that's like what's your last chance. Now it's time for punishment. That's what it means. What is straw? Okay. Why are grown-ups constantly running out of straws? I offered to bring some more straws from home, but Mrs. Cooney said she didn't want them. Na boo boo, Andrea whispered when I got in the hall. I was in love with Mrs. Cooney, but she sure wasn't in love with me. Wow. Okay guys, we finished chapter 4. I hope you guys liked it. I hope you guys liked my notes going on. I think it's lovely. And let's start reading chapter 5. Chapter 5. Checking for headlights. To make Mrs. Cooney fall in love with me, I would have to be on my best behavior. Luckily, I got my chance on the very next day. After we finished pledging the allegiance, Miss Daisy told the class that we had to go to Mrs. Cooney's office one last time. Ryan and Michael wanted to go first, but I got to go first because my name starts with an A. So, na boo boo on them. When I got to Mrs. Cooney's office, she didn't seem mad at me anymore. I was determined to be the most perfect kid in the history of the world. Good morning, AJ, Mrs. Cooney said. Every year, at this time, I had to check the students for headlights. Do you think you're actually checking for headlights, or what do you think? Are you guys confused? Headlights? What do you mean? What do you think it actually means? Think about it. Maybe it's like one of those things where two things sound the same, but they aren't. Okay, let's keep reading to find out. Headlights. Why would a kid bring a headlight to school? Headlights belong on cars. I kept my mouth shut though. I didn't want Mrs. Cooney to get mad at me. Mrs. Cooney put on a pair of rubber gloves. She told me to sit on a chair. She turned a bright light over my chair. It was like one of those lights that shine at bad guys in police TV shows where they're trying to get them to confess. I wanted to tell Mrs. Cooney that checking kids for headlights was doopy, but I was trying my best, trying to be on my best behavior. Is this necessary? I asked politely. Something to be afraid of, she said. Lots of kids have headlights. Nobody I knew. Mrs. Cooney started looking through my hair and rubbing a stick against my head. What a waste of time. If I had a headlight up there, she wouldn't have to look very hard to see it. What happens if I have one? You'll have to stay home from school for a few days, Mrs. Cooney said. I'm going to bring back the question here. Headlights, what? What do you think that even means? Maybe it's two things that sound the same, but they aren't. So, what do you think this means? I mean, you have a little more clues on what it is now. Think about it. Think about it.